Hello and welcome. I am Cyril Stober. Now, the reality of shifts in temperatures and weather patterns and their impact on the Earth was for long a subject of global debate. The phenomenon known generally as climate change has recently come into global focus, with the world finally facing visible consequences of earlier denials. Climate change can affect all aspects of human life: health, ability to grow food, housing, safety, and so many others. Well, expectedly, the United Nations is at the forefront of raising awareness and driving strategies to mitigate the effects of climate change on the world. Here in Nigeria, the designated authority and official focal point to address the impacts of climate change is the National Council on Climate Change. Today, I sit with the Director General Chief Executive of the National Council on Climate Change Secretariat, Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe. Described as an astute energy and environmental policy specialist with a focus on climate change spanning over 16 years of experience in research and training relevant to environmental justice, climate change, and energy, she holds an LLM in Environmental Law and Policy, MSc in International Oil and Gas Management from the Centre of Energy, Petroleum, Mineral Law and Policy, University of Dundee, Scotland, and a PhD in Law from the University of Hull, England. She's an Associate Research Professor of Law at the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe, welcome to One on One.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Right, let me just add that, well, you have since gone on to be the Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Change.
Yes, sir.
Right. So as we go on with this discussion, we'll try to find out what a Special Presidential Envoy on Climate Change does. That's in addition to you being the Director General of the Secretariat of the National Council on Climate Change. But let's begin from a very simple premise, and that is, you think that now the world has come to accept that indeed climate change is real and that its consequences are dire if unchecked?
Of course, climate change is no longer an idea, a concept. If you remember the Brundtland Commission in 1972, where the conversation was, is there really an impact of human activities? Does it really impact our environment? And so we moved down, we've had the Rio Declaration, moved down, had the UNFCCC Commission, convention, and the Kyoto Protocol, and now the Paris Agreement in 2015, that has shown time and time again that the impacts that the human activities does affect our climate, does affect our environment. And so you see years of industrialization, of development has accumulated in what we now know as climate change, which is being described as a catastrophic challenge that is affecting not just a particular set of the continent, but all human life and activities.
Yeah, but the focus is on human activities now. But we do know, of course, that nature has always had its own way too, with tornadoes, volcanoes, and all such natural phenomena occurring. And one would have thought, well, these would have more impact. But for some time now, it's thought that it's human activities that's causing more of the problems than those natural disasters. How so?
So when you, naturally, of course, the earth will have its issues. It's part of living, life, death cycle. But however, there's something known as the environmental sink. And because we have consistently overburdened the sink is not able to capture the emissions, warehouse it and produce a better living environment for us. So because man's activities have consistently eroded on the ability of the earth to have a sink, its carbon sink, that's why it's not processing it fast enough for these impacts not to happen. of course you have the tornadoes, but what has happened, and someone said to me something very profound last week, and the person said to me that climate change has its positive impact, and I was taken aback. And I said, why so? And the person said, because what climate change has done is it has allowed us to see, to be aware of issues we never thought about before. So for instance, let's say in the 1900s, we had the tornadoes. The impact of the tornadoes in the 1900s would not be the impact of the tornadoes now. Let me explain. Why? Because you've had erosion of the atmosphere, the stratosphere itself, and so you have more heat coming down to the earth that you naturally would not have had, and so you have rise in temperature, you have rise in sea level, you then have droughts, you have more rains that you should normally not have, and so this change in weather patterns further exacerbates the tornadoes that you will see and the force that they naturally would have had. So you see our impact, because again we are, our activities are eroding the atmosphere and it's changing the temperature. So you see that accumulates down to what it is we're facing. So of course, climate change is anthropogenic. It's heightened by anthropogenic activities.
Well, speaking of the carbon emissions and such human activities that have caused it or exacerbated the situation, the first thing that comes to mind is fossil fuels. But again, the irony is, at some point in time, the fossil fuel was a source of human development.
Okay, lots of questions. So we've moved.
Right.
At one point in time, we were looking for fire, right? We finally found fire. We moved into coal, which of course is fossil fuel dependency, and then we've moved into crude oil, we've moved into natural gas, and then we're moving to renewable energy. So consistently, man is finding ways to better his environment and better use of energy. Carbon dioxide, okay? That's where you have the carbon emissions. And of course, you know that all those things still go up to the atmosphere and still cause the issues that we have, and the popularly known as the greenhouse gases. So accumulation of these greenhouse gases is what is causing the issues that we're having. Of course, there's the movement of, and that's where we're moving to decarbonization. Right. Because we're looking towards a situation whereby for us in Nigeria is 2060, where our activities compared to the carbon emissions that we're emitting would be balanced, because you can't really remove carbon. But of course, you can have a decarbonization of your operations, meaning where you remove carbon, you reduce carbon in all the things you do. And for us, it's 2060. That is our net, what it is we have pronounced. In the law, it's 2070. That's the Climate Change Act. We're hoping that by 2070, Nigeria would have gotten to net zero. Right. Of carbon emissions. But what that means, let me explain. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have carbon in your operations. It just means that you are able to counteract that with other activities that are able to capture the carbon or reduce the emission of carbon. So I know that fossil fuel is what we're using to develop, but should we continue in that manner? Should we continue emitting fossil fuel, continue emitting carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases? We are further endangering ourselves. One, because Nigeria is highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change. I know that we might argue, and that is the argument, that compared to the developed world, our percentage of emission is very minimal.
Exactly, that's the point. The emissions coming from these parts of the world, African countries and particularly Nigeria. And you've had countries of the world highly industrialized, they utilize the fossil fuels, they attain such heights, and then they turn around and say, no, you don't have to go that way. Find some other way to develop while we're up there. So if there should be anyone who should be paying more, shouldn't it be the bigger polluters than small developing countries?
And that's why you have those commitments that has been made, even though the argument that we have going towards COP29 is you've made commitments of 100 billion, we haven't seen it. We haven't seen as much as it as possible. But I want to address something. It's very easy for us to say that we are very low emitters, but again, is to understand that because of where we're geographically located, right, and also because we have low adaptive capacity. For instance, I don't want to overflog it, but what has happened to us in Maduekwe and the consistent flooding that we have very low adaptive capacity. We cannot sit down on our hands and say, okay, we are not emitting, so we shouldn't take active steps. But what can we do? What can we do? We can invest in or ensure investment in infrastructure that will help build our adaptive capacity, our resilience. When we build our resilience, we're able to withstand the gross impact of climate change on our human, on our persons, on our livelihoods, because by the time you have the flooding, you have health issues, you have infrastructure that you have to rebuild again. So these things are putting in pressure on our budget that we're already, of course, Nigeria is going through, some economic issues. So these are things we need to point out. So going towards COP29, I'm sorry if I'm bringing it too early, is that for us as a country, we understand that we need support to move Nigeria to where she needs to be. Yes, we have said in our NDC 20% when we're doing it ourselves, 47% with support. And so it's for us to go to the negotiations, to COP29, Conference of the Parties, the 29th Conference of the Parties, to say, listen, what support can you give to Nigeria? But Nigeria has to be very clear as well. Bankable projects. What are the bankable projects that we have? And that's why, as a secretariat, one of the things we're doing is turning the nationally determined contribution implementation framework, which we launched early this year, into a financial plan to be very clear, to show the development, the donor partners, to show private sector bankable projects that can help build our resilience. Because one of the things we're trying to do is, it's very easy to say public funding should come in, donor funding should come in. But we are at the point where we're saying, private sector, you have the money. Help us build this resilience. Help us to be able to, 50 years from now, our children will not be suffering from the impacts that we're currently having, that Maiduguri will not happen again, that it will be a thing of the past, basically flooding and the issues that we're dealing with.
All right. Thank you so much. We started in this manner because we wanted to put into proper context what climate change is all about. But again, in our introductory comments, we had noted that you're Director General of the National Council on Climate Change. And perhaps now is the best time to talk about the role of this council, as it is the focal point of involving what you set out to do. Let's go in that direction, and then we'll return to other matters of development.
Okay, thank you so much. I really want to appreciate the National Assembly for that bill, which is now an act. Nigeria is the first country in West Africa to have a Climate Change Act 2021. And I really want to also thank the President as well, who assented to that act. Because what it did was it positioned Nigeria clearly as a giant of driving climate action in West Africa. Kenya was the first country to have done that. But what Nigeria did better than Kenya is that while Kenya was still grappling with being able to put in the infrastructure in place, the structures in place to implement the act, in 2022, we had enacted the act. The act was enacted in 2021. In 2022, the council was inaugurated. The First Director General, Dr. Salisu Dahiru, was also appointed as well. Now, this is what that said to the international community. Nigeria is ready. Nigeria is not just talking. Nigeria is making active steps to ensure that she implements climate action. And what is this council about? The National Council on Climate Change is made up of different ministries, relevant ministries, and ministries that before then we had what you had called the Interministerial Ministry Committee, people who came together to talk about climate change and how we can drive it. But however, understanding, and one of the challenges was having people who could not make the decisions come to those meetings. But it was necessary for us to have the President head a council where he could show the world that Nigeria wasn't just talking about changing climate action, but the President had a very active interest in implementing this. And then he's able to speak to the ministers who their functions and duties were to also implement that at their own level. And so you have the Secretariat who runs the day-to-day job of ensuring that the policies, the implementation of the Act. So the Secretariat is actually a legal enforcement agency. The role of the Secretariat is to ensure the enforcement and implementation of the Climate Change Act across all ministries, departments, agencies, private sector, and individuals. Our role is also to coordinate efforts to ensure that we're able to coordinate efforts at the subnationals and the national, and with all cross-cutting ministries. You may know that we're structured in a way that we're supposed to have six zonal coordinators to help the 6 geopolitical zone to mainstream that action there, and then also 36 state coordinators as well, or state directors, to ensure that there is a link between the subnational and the national. Because one of the things I have seen and we have seen is that there's always a disconnect between the national and the subnational. But right. That is what the Climate Change Secretariat is meant to do, to coordinate these efforts.
Right. Well, tell us a little bit about this Climate Change Action Plan. It falls under your purview as well.
Okay. So our role, again, is to, like I said, mainstream climate action amongst all MDAs. We are in the process of developing that action plan, and we're also in the process of developing the carbon budget, because you have to have a carbon budget to be able to do the action plan. But while we're still there, we're not folding our hands, we're not sitting down. We're consistently conversing with the subnationals, we're consistently conversing with the MDAs to share knowledge with them. I help them also develop their policies as well, and to bring them up to speed, to build their capacity to know the right path to take, and what are the different activities they can start bringing on board. For instance, how can you ensure that your operations as an MDA is you're reducing your carbon footprints? For instance, are you having a single? Of course, you know the plastic regulation. Are you having single plastic in your? Are you using recycled papers?
Now, that's an interesting aspect of all of these. The question of plastic bags, single-use plastics, and the rest of them. Now, some countries have clearly articulated policies on the use and eventual phasing out of this. Well, it wouldn't seem as if there is a deliberate movement here. I'm saying this because one of the most common uses of these plastics, of course, is what we call pure water, the sachet, waters. And this is all over the place, and people just buy, drink, and discard. Perhaps as we go on, we would want to ask, your mission, does it also include raising awareness on such practices that damage the environment? People tossing stuff out, refuse, management of wastes and all that.
Exactly. So our job as well is to educate the public on activities that will harm our environment and also their health as well. So that's part of our mandate. And one of the things we've done, because we believe in being the change that you want to see. In our office, we're segregating waste. We have a bin for plastic, we have a bin for paper, we have a bin for general waste. Because for me, you need to start somewhere. And we're consistently in all the engagements that we have, and this is one of the engagement actually, because I believe this is also a platform to intimate the public that building your houses on flood lines or floodplains will ensure that we're going to have flooding. That when you indiscriminately throw waste, that you're very sure that you're clogging the drainage and also going to cause flooding for us as well. So there's a need to change the way we live, the way we are just different activities. And I know that there's a policy on climate. There's a plastic waste policy, and there's also a plastic regulation as well that the Ministry of Environment spearheaded.
We have not been very good managers of waste, have we?
We're getting there. I would say that currently, I know that there are a number of private companies that are currently recycling waste, recycling plastics, recycling papers, and it's good to start engaging with them as well. And I think we're taking baby steps, but it's good we take steps than no steps at all. Because gradually, let me explain this. The issue of environment is seen as an elitist idea. I never chop finish, you want to make and protect environment, you know. But whether we like it or not, is facing us every day, stuck in our faces. It's no longer a question of, oh, now a Igbo person, now Igbo idea, but it is our local people that are facing these issues. Our women have to consistently go into the forest or, you know, trek more miles than usual just to get firewood, trek more miles than usual just to get water. So this thing is affecting us even more so at the grassroots. What can we do differently? Even, I want to also bring up the idea of sanitation, health and sanitation, linking climate change to sanitation. What can we do to ensure that we're mainstreaming water and sanitation and health in the things that we're doing as a country and building those very important infrastructure? So it goes back again to MDAs. When you do your budget, what is the climate action component of your budget, right? When you want to do activities, what climate action component of that is in your budget, even as private sector? Because again, what we're saying to private sector is that we need to bring you on board. There is money, come and invest into activities, into projects that will help us reduce our carbon emission, that will help us implement our obligation to meet our commitments in our NDCs. Private sector has what it takes.
DJ, let me bring you to this issue. I always wonder about it. And it speaks to the issue of development, the growing of cities. And of course, we can't take away the matter of slums. And in developing cities, and also developing infrastructure, sometimes there is considerable damage to the environment. You want to set up a housing estate, and you know how important it is, shelter. Trees have to go. Roads have to be built. Trees have to go. So where do you begin to manage both as to develop your cities and your environment with an eye on also managing the environment to a point where, you know, there's a balance? How do you go about doing this?
First and foremost, the people who are handling these projects need to understand that things have changed. So the world is moving towards building houses that conform to the topography of the place. You can build your housing estate fitting into, making allowance for the environment, for nature to thrive. Can't we get to that level? Can't our architectures think, our civil engineers, can they think in that level? So we need to move from what used to happen in the past where you just fell all trees and say, okay, you're making way for development, you know. The world has gone into a place where development is balanced, and that's why you have sustainable development. Right. Development that meets the needs of the present and will also meet the needs of the future. As an urban planner, what are you thinking? As an estate developer, are you thinking about the future in your designs? What is the component, what is the green component of your building? Are you thinking eco designs? Are you thinking an estate that, yes, housing, of course, affordable housing, very important, but also what about the trees? Because we find out that a lot of the things we're doing, we're creating concrete jungles. And at the end of the day, increasing the heat that is coming to us because we don't have the trees to shed us from that. We don't have the trees that will take in the carbon dioxide and give us oxygen that we need. So there needs to be a change. And I think, of course, that's where this conversation comes in. How do we, and actually you're giving me an assignment, how do we interact with urban developers? How do we intimate them on the need to include climate climate resilient planning in their infrastructure, because again, even down to cement. So there's cement now that is you can use that doesn't have some certain components that would harm the environment. So there's a need to have that component. And I believe this is where it gets back to schooling. So of course, bottom-top approach. But in the tertiary, can we have that in the tertiary field, in tertiary education? Can we teach our civil engineers? Can we teach our architectures? Can we teach them to embrace new ways of building? Because nature will resist. Nature will resist. And that is what nature is doing. You cannot box nature in a corner. It will say, no, I'm going to fight back. And so, sorry?
Well, if we started talking about development, and felling of trees, if we started on the premise of housing, perhaps we started on the soft note. We haven't gone to the real issue now. But this now is the primary matter of existence: food. A country strives to attain food security, and that's part of the commitment of this administration to having a food secure nation. Food security, the first thought that comes to mind, agricultural activities. Yes, I know the term green is everywhere now, but let's bring it down to the local level. To increase yield, you probably have to cultivate more. And of course, there's also the issue of depleting the resources by farming activities and extensive agricultural practices. How do you manage this, especially in a country that is striving to attain food security with a massive population, with poverty levels very high, and, with people learning that mechanized agriculture is the way to go, which of course brings us back to the issue of, so how do you manage all of this? And food is the basic, that's the first in everything.
I would say we're not even doing enough in the agriculture space. I mean, with regards to where we need to go to. 70% or more of our farmers are actually substantive farming. That is what we do, meaning farming to put food in your belly, right?
Yes.
So how can we upscale that, right? So how can we introduce, and you're very right, there's a need to introduce mechanized farming. And I know very much that the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security is working really hard to achieve this objective.
So how do we do this upscaling without harming the environment?
That's why you have climate smart, resilient agriculture.
Right.
And it is a system where your agriculture practices are in line with protecting the environment. Of course, you have, that there are seeds that you use that are, you said something about having to do more farming to have more yield. Really? Not necessarily.
Okay, greater yield.
Yes, greater yield.
I don't want to go into, and some of these, of course, we know are genetically modified, but that's another story, which I may not want to go in at this point in time, because there are also issues over that. But ordinarily, just ensure that the agricultural practices do not harm the environment.
For our farmers, where we are now is because of climate change, because of the impact of climate change, our farmers are dealing with difference in rain patterns that they normally would have to deal with. And so where we are now is being able to help them to identify the rains using technology, GIS, to know what time the rain is going to fall and at what period, and that will also help them store the output that they have.
Okay, I'll have to ask you to pause a while here.
Okay.
Well, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with this train of discussion. So stay with us, and one-on-one, we'll be back shortly.
NTA Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Why should we be in a difficult situation financially?
Once upon a time we were rich, but we're not a rich country anymore.
Disaster management is everybody's business.
In all these times, the organization turned to Nigeria.
We would as much want to harness the capacity that is within us so that we see how we can become self-reliant.
1 month ended and you said you are increasing warning strike by 2 months. I mean, you are incubating madness.
Even if these are officials of government who have been told to go and enforce the law and they have gone against the law itself, they must be held accountable.
One-on-one, Friday, 10:30 p.m. on NTA Network. Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe, the Director General of the National Council on Climate Change Secretariat. And we're looking at the ways of mitigating the impact of climate change. This council, as you've told us, has a lot of work ahead of it, and you're already collaborating with different organizations. It's more like a clearinghouse for an interministerial activities on how Nigeria's position can be projected, and not the least when it comes to the Conference of Partners, which we've always subscribed to. One aspect, quickly, is that the President had said to the international community, look, we are small polluters, you are the big ones. So there has to be more incentives for us to take these steps that we're taking, and Nigeria happens to be in the forefront on the continent of Africa in doing this. How so is this a response? In other words, in local parlance, it's like saying, if you want me to do this, you have to pay me to do it.
Well, I may want to disagree about paying me to do it.
All right.
But the fact remains that we need to build our capacity, and we cannot do it alone. Remember that SDG 17 talks about partnership and collaboration, and that's where we're hinging on to say that how do we meet our obligation as a country if we do not have that external funding? You're telling us to move away from fossil fuel, and we're talking about stranded rigs. How do we move where you want us to move if you do not support us? And so what the president had meant is to say to the country, support Nigeria to ensure that she meets her commitments. And that's why we have pledged 20%, as to say that on our own we can meet 20%. But with your help, with your support, we can meet 47% of our NDC's obligation. And we can see that happen with different partners. We have them supporting us on different aspects, be it capacity building, be it funding for renewable energy projects, and we see that coming from different angles as well. So, of course, that is being done, but what we're saying is, can you upscale what it is you're doing? Can you support us more to move to where we're going to? I want to say here that as a country, we're in the process of reviewing our nationally determined contribution to move it to 3.0. All countries are doing that. We have also sent out an ask to the international community, to the donor partners, to say to them, could you help support Nigeria in different aspects of reviewing our NDC? Because, of course, there are certain things we can't do on our own. There are certain expertise that we do not have. And so we would need to get their support to be able to do that. And so that's where we are.
Right. With the National Council on Climate Change, we have policies in place, and you just spoke about renewable energies, and for the greater part of it, energy has been supported by fossil fuels, without prejudice to ongoing efforts to move from petrol-powered engines to CNG, which of course some people have also said that may not be the ideal. We might want to move to strictly electric vehicles in the future. But I'm looking at all of these within the context of a pauperized people who, as we said at the start of this program, the first consideration is waiting I go chop. So don't you think to some extent these plans might sound a little bit abstract? What I'm trying to ask here is, what are the plans of this council to go right down to the grassroots? You did talk about going along with the subnationals, but beyond that, to the people themselves.
So again, one of the things we've planned, or one of the things we have in the pipeline, is to actually go to the local government. These are where the challenges happen. To first and foremost create awareness as to what is climate change. And can we say it in your language? Waiting be climate change. If you know if you speak Pidgin, if you speak Afroibo, Guinea be climate change. Reduce it down to the barest minimum. And those are the plans we have for 2025. Unfortunately, we can't do that now because of how short the time is, but these are the things we have, and that's why we're engaging the subnationals to ensure that first quarter that we have our people in all these spaces having that conversation, because we have found that there's a need to socialize. What does it mean to socialize? Create awareness, to orientate the populace on the nationally determined contributions. Let them see where it meets with them. Let them see how it affects them. Let them see where their own contribution is. Because truth be told, I think Nigerians, even in the villages, are doing several things that are actually climate action, but do not know that that is what they're doing. We have found out that a lot of work is being done at the subnationals that is not adequately reported. And that's one of the things we're also doing, working with donor partners to ensure that we have capacity building orientation for the subnationals, geopolitical zone, the local government, on what this thing is. And one of the things you could also think about is how do you get the, even down to secondary school geography teacher involved, to include them in measuring the weather and also put that as well in the curriculum. So these are the things we have planned, most especially for 2025. Why? Let me explain why. Because the COP is November, and by the time we get back from COP, we already have December, and people are going for Christmas. But you wouldn't want to, break off people's plans, and that's why we have put it very major, aggressive awareness, aggressive stakeholders engagement, aggressive community engagement on climate change actions for the first quarter of 2025.
Right, and that's where I'd like to have a little bit more on the question of this awareness. And lots of times, you've just said that a lot is happening which is not adequately reported. But I want to paint a scenario here. This is simple folk peasant Cyril Stober. And I reside in one of those way out places, remote hamlet. But I have to do all my cooking using firewood and every other thing. So I fell trees regularly. Firewood for energy. Today, someone says, you have to think twice before you do that. Or maybe along the line, I got used to moving to the kerosene stove. But again, this is a product of the fossil fuels that we talked about. So it's beyond my reach anyway. And the firewood that is the savior of this peasant called Cyril is being told he has to go easy on that too. And so I sit back and ask, what is the alternative?
That's it.
Renewable energies we've talked about, but do those come down? Today, even in the urban centers, if you decide to go with a solar, you know what the cost is. So this is this peasant talking now.
So this year, the government instituted or created what is known as the Project Evergreen. And part of the main role, or one of the fulcrum of the Project Evergreen, is creating an eco-industrial hub. And what is this eco-industrial hub? For us to be able to manufacture renewable energy solutions, clean cooking stoves, that we have some of them being put together in Kano, clean cooking stoves in Nigeria. Because one of the things, whether we like it or not, is expensive. I do agree with you 100% that these solutions are expensive, but we need to look for what to do. And that's why the government has done the project, is started off the Project Evergreen and having the Eco-Industrial Hub for asking manufacturers, come and produce this thing in Nigeria. You produce it in Nigeria, you reduce the cost. But be that as it may, we're talking about clean cooking stove, and we have several of them in the market. We have several of them. We have some companies producing that or manufacturing that or assembling that in Kano, and I'm being told some of them are doing like 1 million stove, and they've taken this to the rural area, to peasant Cyril Stoba, and he's saying to him, this amount of firewood is all you need for this stove, vis-a-vis the other large amount that you need, and it's sometimes called Save 80. Save 80 meaning that 80% of your compared to what it is you'd have had to do before, you're using this amount, also down to the energy being generated. I agree with you that one of the challenges the women have said is this alternative is expensive. How do we bring it down to the masses? I come back again to where I earlier said that there's a need for private sector to be involved in this process. If we do not start manufacturing this in the country, the cost of it will not be as subsidized as we need it to be. Another option being said is, can we sell what is being reduced as carbon credits, and then we can use it and reduce the amount the women, maybe $3. How much is $3? In Nigeria, where we're going, the woman will pay $5, $3 for it. But can't we have it less than this? What can we do? And that's why I said all hands are needed on deck. To be quite frank, this is a very serious matter, because I've met women who have said, wait, madam, you dey talk climate change. Not be me they cause the climate to change. Say, I dey cut firewood. I make I feed me and my pikin. But you dey tell me make I reduce fossil fuel. Now me be the highest emitter. I say, madam, as you dey fall these three, you know say, we dey need forest cover. As you dey reduce this, say you go use them do firewood. Our forest cover they reduce. Not be just the forest cover. We say we need this forest. Remember I talked about environmental sink.
Right, environmental sink.
We need this forest to serve as sink for us to be able to warehouse, trap those carbon emissions. But very important, I hear you, sir, and that is very important. We actually need to put it on the front burner, because it's a question that the women are asking. What alternative are you giving us? For example, an alternative. If we planted shea butter trees, right? We don't fall them. We can actually have them produce shea butter association. We know how shea butter is. I rub shea butter. Right. We can rival Ghana in shea butter. That's number one. Number two, with the trees, you're actually putting yourself up. Let's say communities decided to start planting trees or use them. There's something called carbon market. And there's something called carbon market, and the natural, the reduction of the carbon emissions planted by the trees can also be used for the communities for their own projects. But again, I hear you. What can we do in the meantime? We need private sector involvement.
All right.
Public sector funds cannot help us go the whole hog. We need private sector funding as well. Donor Partners Fund cannot help us go the whole hog. We need private sector involvement.
Well, closely related to that, since we're talking about nature, brings me to the matter of wildlife preservation. And here also, there are challenges as well. And we hear that at the rate most of the animals are depleting, at some point in time we probably would read about them in books and see them in films. But again, for a layman like me, I'd say whose existence is key here? Is it man's or the animals?
So man must learn to live in harmony with the environment. What is environment? Environment is animals, flora, fauna, and man. There's a balance being created. Should you deplete one, you create an unbalance, and then you create the issues that we're having. Of course, it's necessary for man to live in harmony with the animals. And every animal has the role it plays. You're talking about biodiversity. Every animal has the role it plays, even down to the earthworm that you see in the soil. It's all helping to help the soil to be fertile. So by the time we have activities, burning the bushes or killing these animals for maybe medical reasons or for whatever reasons we have.
Bushmeat.
Bushmeat, I agree.
People have developed a taste for that. How you change those and say, you know, this delicacy, you're ruining the balance.
You got me there. But yes, bushmeat, I do agree. At the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, do I want to survive or do I want to be extinct? Think about the dinosaurs. Whether we like it or not, our activities, bushmeat, as much as we love it, all those things harm the environment and create an imbalance. And so consistently we need to think to create that balance. Biodiversity is key. Biodiversity is key to building resilience as well to climate impact. Because all these beetles, ants, these tiny things that you think you don't see, microorganisms, they all fuse together. For instance, we're talking about erosion in the soil. So all these things fuse together to create that harmony, that ecosystem that we want, that environmental sink that I talked about earlier. They are all part of it. For instance, you know, somebody said to me, and sorry, very important, I found out that we don't really do, maybe I might be wrong, but we don't really do enough bird study in Nigeria. But birds are very key. A bird will tell you whether where you are has clean air. For instance, sparrows. You see them, they sing, they wake you up in the morning because perhaps the environment you have has trees and all those things, they help to check that, like thermometer to our environment. Somebody said to me and I was very surprised, vultures. Do you know that vultures are part of cleaning the environment? Because they have an opportunity to take in these dead things and put it in their system. If you kill vultures, you remove vultures from a particular community, you don't have somebody who is going to come, you don't have an animal that will come and take the composing thing, clear it out from the system, and then by the time you leave it, you now have maybe the dog comes to eat it a bit, the dog will go and, I'm so sorry, go and, you know, put it out somewhere, right. That goes into the system, the child eats it, different, it still goes back to the system. And then you go back to our health. So everything goes back to the human health. How much is your life? What is your life worth? Bushmeat or being alive?
Well, we introduced you as also a special presidential envoy on climate change. And so now is the time to ask, what does a special presidential envoy on climate change do?
The special presidential envoy on climate change leads Nigeria's diplomacy on climate actions and climate issues to also bring to bear, interact with other members of the international community to engage them and say, what are your plans for the country? This is also what Nigeria is doing to help lead Nigeria's forefront on climate action. That is the role of the SPEC.
All right, and so Nigeria projects to the international community, and what direction it is going.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe, you do have your work cut out for you in this matter. But coming back home, we'd like to spend the last few minutes of this program to once again focus on the National Council on Climate Change and its mandate and what it has so far. And of course, as we always ask our guests who come to explain policies to us, we say, what are the benchmarks that you have set out to measure what progress you're making on these? So these policies don't end up being, as they say, talk shops, and there are no somersaults. Today we are in this direction, and some other administration comes in and we're looking the other way.
I've given myself actually 1 year to appraise the steps I've taken. I came in June, and I've given myself June 2025 to appraise myself, to say, this is what I've been able to achieve as a Director General and Chief Executive Officer. Number one, closing the gap between the subnationals and the national, that we're able to speak in one voice. And one of the things we've been able to do is that for the very first time, we are training MDAs and subnationals on climate negotiation. It's been ongoing from Monday and it's going to end on Friday. Of course, is to build capacity, because for me, should we not have capacity to negotiate on our stance on climate issues, then we haven't led where we're supposed to lead. That's number one, developing the capacity of climate negotiators for Nigeria, building a strong team of climate negotiators. I'm seeing where we can have climate negotiators on-site and off-site. Let me explain what that means. We have them, for instance, in Baku, and we have a team back at home who are communicating real-time to those who are on-site to ensure that Nigeria's position is effectively protected. And of course, climate negotiation is a full career. That's number one. Number two is to build the capacity of my staff. I have been blessed with an amazing set of people who come from different walks of life and mostly came from the DCC, Department of Climate Change. These are experts, scientists in that field. What we have done is to have a greenhouse gas emission team, and to build the capacity to be able to ensure that we have that greenhouse gas inventory. Very important for us to have that greenhouse gas inventory. Also the policy team as well. And what the policy team does is to provide technical assistance. We've done that for Kanu, we're going to do that for Sokoto and some other states to help them look at the climate policy that they want to design and say, vis-a-vis international policies, regional policies, continental policies, this is what we believe you should be able to put together. And then we also have the disaster risks team as well, and their role and their job is to monitor everything else that we call disaster, provide policy direction, policy recommendation, to also train them as well to know what to do and how to get about what it is they need to do. Then again, we have the fact that Nigeria needs to submit a biennial transparency report by this December 2024. We have the team as well who are also engaging in that. So very much for me, it's important for me that 2025, I would have said that under my watch, we're able to do that. And then the NDC review that we need to submit by February 2025 as well. In addition to that, I cannot overemphasize this, is being able to coordinate actions with all MDAs, and I'm also monitoring myself on that. How am I able to communicate with the different MDAs, with the different ministries, departments, and agencies to intimate them on their role, on their responsibility to mainstream climate action implementation in Nigeria?
Well, this is at this point we'll say thank you so very much, Dr. Nkiruka Maduekwe, Director General, National Council on Climate Change Secretariat. We'd like to thank you for talking to us on One-on-One. We hope you come again some other time so we can explore further this matter of climate change and see how we match a need for rapid development and industrialization with protecting the environment and cutting down on our carbon.
I forgot to add carbon markets.
Okay, I'm not going. Well, that's all right. So thank you once again for coming on One-on-One. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. It's an
Right.
honor to be here.
Right.
God bless you.
And that's our program today. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with One-on-One. I'm Cyril Stober. Bye for now.